Welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to BAK, Basis voor Actuele Kunst. My name is Maria Hlavajova. I'm Artistic Director of BAK. And on my behalf and on behalf of the BAK team, I would like to really welcome you here. Welcome to the contributors to the reading groups, working sessions, public program, and to all of you who have just joined us for the public program. I'm aware many of us have gathered here since this morning. I'm producing a beep involuntarily. And I heard people speaking of mind-blowing sessions. Does it help if I move somewhere? Do you hear that? Sorry. Anyway, what a wonderful and urgent occasion to gather. The convention Usufructuaries of Earth, the third and culminating chapter of the eponymous project convened by BAK together with artist Marwa Arsanios. Welcome to Marwa specifically, and thank you for this collaboration. Marwa will join BAK's convener for research and publications, Wietske Maas, here on stage in a minute. But before we get to that, I'd like to share with you a couple of rather fragmented offhand thoughts. Now, at the risk of sounding somewhat naive and anecdotal, I want to say that at the onset of our exchange on Usufructuaries with Marwa and within the BAK team, I was intensely reminded of the penetrating sense of injustice I've carried in me since I can remember. And something I have not managed to comprehend till today, for I simply cannot grasp how that foundational moment of so many of today's struggles and wars came to be. That somebody one day somewhere in the world put their foot on the ground and claimed to be theirs. It is not that the project, the Usufructuaries of Earth, in any way answers this perhaps somewhat simplistic query. For to be sure, the term usufructuaries is not unfamiliar within bourgeois justifications of property. There it is based on a connection between use and ownership. That is the understanding that they who own or are granted use of a land will utilize it predominantly for their capital gain. Not to mention that they who own are also granted the right to destroy that which they own. Just think and see all around the consequences of it for land and earth and for a possibility of livable life and a livable life in common. Now, against such a reality, or better yet, in spite of it, with the Usufructuaries of Earth project, we want to learn from and with the practices that reclaim usufructuary much closer to the Latin origin of the term, as usus et fructus, or as use of the fruits of earth, enacting thusly an ethical relationality that's driven not by the economic or quantitative imperative, but by the ecological qualitative ideals of social and ecological justice, that is, appealing to the usufructuaries of Earth in a way that grounds Earth's life over capitals, and thus of transgenerational using of Earth while protecting it from exhaustion, depletion and destruction. Usufructuaries of Earth, thus, in short, inquires into practices of ethically sharing the earth usufruct and ways of transfiguring regimes of ownership into communal usership. Many of you know the project consists of 3 parallel and really tightly entwined chapters, along with today's and tomorrow's convention. Chapter 3. Chapter 2 has unfolded through a federated structure of reading groups in Amman, Berlin and Rotterdam, as well as a slow-growing reader and learning curriculum on BAK's online publishing forum, Prospections. The discussions emerging from the reading groups generated and continue to generate texts, interviews, annotations, and artistic contributions that we will be further unpacking during this 2-day gathering, and I believe further than that. I also wholeheartedly invite you, in case you haven't yet managed, to visit chapter 1 of the project, the remarkable exhibition by Marwa here at BAK. As to the convention structure, the convention is composed of working sessions, which took place earlier today, And I also understood there would be some impromptu continuations of these working sessions tomorrow. During these working sessions, invited contributors and contributors selected through an open call have developed propositions that will be shared and negotiated throughout the program today and tomorrow. Now, I really, truly hope that the convention offers ample time for conversations, whether those listed in the program handout that I hope you all have in your hands, or around the convention schedule of talks, sonic interventions, and commensal moments, through which, in the words of Marwa and Wietske Maas, who co-convened with this gathering with the contributors and the BAK team, and I quote, "The convention hopes to offer pathways for a variety of transgenerational alliances be formed between usufructuaries of Earth that have gone before, are happening in the present, or are yet to be." Now, what would it mean to undo the political, economic, and legal infrastructures of property and enclosure, of land, of bodies, of labor, of other beings, and of non-organic life, and to learn, imagine, and embody a living relation to the earth altogether differently? What theoretical and practical tools does one have at their disposal to subvert the sedimented narrative of individuated possession that lies at the core of modern legal and political formations? Can one imagine and organize around such an imaginary of a world no longer divided up, no longer subject to seemingly natural right of privatization? These are just some of the questions already pondered up and throughout the day today, and I hope to continue from here to share and learn on usufruct as a way of undoing property from the regimes of privatization that perpetually usurp the earth resources for the interests of a select few. It would be an understatement to say that these questions around earth, land, and property are immensely urgent today. Importantly, we must not unsee how land is also the object where social, ecological, economic, legal, and political struggles intersect. An economic asset, a place of connection with identity and social legitimacy, a political territory. Land is the nexus of so many conflicts, past and contemporary, including the sickening genocidal and ecocidal wars waged today, whether in Ukraine or in Palestine, among many other wars the world over. Unpronounceable, monstrous crimes are being committed as we sit here. In this context, should you find a moment, I would also like to invite and encourage you to visit a presentation of the work by Center of Spatial Technologies, realized in collaboration with Forensic Architecture in 2023, titled "A City Within a Building." You can find the presentation nearby at Stadsschouwburg Utrecht, which is a city theater in Utrecht. And it is a project that opened yesterday, organized by BAK and brought to life in collaboration with Spring Performing Arts Festival, currently taking place in Utrecht with a host of quite remarkable performances, I think. The work is in effect an investigation into the Russian military airstrike on Mariupol Drama Theatre during the siege of Mariupol from February to May 2022, which was then destroyed as a key shelter and one of the city's last centers of solidarity and civic resistance. A City Within a Building offers a look at this theatre venue and culture infrastructure at large, if you will, as something else than a target on a military radar. It becomes an embodiment of the collective memory of the witnesses to the attack. This presentation is one of many collaborations with art, culture, and educational institutions within the city of Utrecht in the series that BAK organizes under the title "To Watch the War in Solidarity," related to our last year's project of the Image Forum To Watch the War, the moving image amidst the invasion of Ukraine 2014 through to 2023. Now, this series of humble and impromptu presentations emerge from a concern about the lasting state of war that engulfs the world, contributing to the global rise of fascist politics and the apparent growing lust for the hegemony of forever empires. Now, disturbingly, one is reminded time and again as with the case of the Russian invasion in Ukraine and the genocidal war by Israel upon Palestine, that waging wars is part and parcel of the current global predicament. War as, of course, direct violent conflict, but also, in an expanded sense, as an infrastructure of racial capitalism at the through line of slavery, colonialism, imperialism, and oppression of all kinds. Next within the series will be Day for Palestine on 9 June 2024 at ECHO in Utrecht, which BAK organizes together with artist Phil Collins, Tabaria Cafe, Print for Palestine, and Basic Activist Kitchen. If usufructuaries of Earth, or perhaps usufructuaries of the Earth, if you will, in some sense evoke Frantz Fanon's ground-shifting testament, Wretched of the Earth, which calls upon the condemned of the earth to rise up against imperialism and create a new affirmative world that departs from the hypocrisies and violence of settler and neocolonialism, as well as capitalist destruction of people, nature, and thus the world. I think much like Usufructuaries of Earth, the project to watch the war in solidarity carries the very same ethos. In closing, I have a couple of acknowledgements and household notes for you for this gathering. I would like to specifically thank Marwa and Wietske, Marwa Arsanios and Wietske Maas, for co-convening this gathering together with contributors to this convention, contributors to reading groups and working sessions, as well as the entire BAK team. My sincerest thanks to all of you, and in particular from within the team, Alexandra Martens Serrano, Clara Balaguer, Alfredo Alejandro Navarrete Cortez, Grace Lostia, Oli Patterson, Bart Witte, Basia Kutsier, and Didit Wickler. The project is part of the long-term BAK research itinerary called Propositions for Non-Fascist Living that started in 2017, and this is nearly a last project within the series, which ends at the end of 2024. And has been made possible with the support of Dutch Ministry of Education, Culture and Science and City Council of Utrecht. Please note that the event is photographed and filmed, although the cameras are pointed at the stage rather than the audience. For the smokers among us, please do refrain from smoking in front of our building and help us keep our neighbors happy by using the specially designated smoking area at the back of BAK. And lastly, and I'm reiterating of what Alejandro already presented to you, as I hope you will be joining us tomorrow as well, as a significant part of the gathering will take place in Spanish. I would like to ask you to bring your mobile phones or other devices together with your headphones if possible for simultaneous translation via Zoom. All that said, I wish us an inspiring and empowering gathering. And Marwa and Wietske, the floor is yours.
Yeah, just a quick one. Does anybody still need to be on the Spanish channels? On their phones? How many? Can you put hands up? Just you? Then you can, so we have headphones placed on that corner and in that corner as well. And so if you want to do that, you can. Anybody else? No? Español. See? You don't want Spanish. You want Spanish? Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. I didn't think of that. I don't speak Spanish. Anyone?
Hola, para los que necesiten interpretación en español, hay en cada esquina audífonos, si se pueden sentar ahí, y luego va a haber translation. Gracias.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Maria. And yeah, just to echo the thanks to the whole team, and especially to Alexandra, who's been really so pivotal together with Marwa and myself in bringing particularly this convention together. It's great to see all of you. Feel free to move a little bit more to the front. Don't feel intimidated. We wanted to kind of break up the proscenium sort of dynamics and have people kind of enroach the stage a bit more. But maybe that'll happen as the program unfolds. Yeah, so here we are indeed. And I think this whole convention has been so much guided by your work, Marwa, in political organizing and yeah, through your artistic work of organizing and bringing people together and assembling and kind of in conversation with the experience that we've had at BAK over the years. Indeed, in convening and where the exhibition becomes a kind of pretext for people to come together and to collectively learn. Yeah, Maria already mentioned the other chapters. I just wanted to riff off the chapter 2, which is the reading groups and online publication. It's a slowly assembling reader on our digital platform Prospections. And over the last months, we've been assembling together texts that have been selected by the reading group conveners in Rotterdam and in Berlin and in Amman. And over time, we'll also, from what generates from this convention and from these discussions, hopefully also see some new pieces, texts or other kinds of contributions, conversations, etc., also appearing on this platform. But I wanted to just share with you a beautiful reader that's actually printed out all the reading texts that were, well, not all of the reading texts, but a selection of the reading texts that were read in this federated structure of reading groups in Rotterdam, Berlin, and Amman. And that's in, if you don't have yours already, this has been printed by our colleagues from Community Portal. And so it's all been printed on paper that's been basically like recycled, but from that was like from the ultra-dependent public school that we had here at BAK, and I think other stocks as well. So yeah, it's a beautiful package. So please do collect yours if you haven't already. And I think there's some more coming as well. Another suitcase delivery tomorrow. So people who, if we run out tonight, hopefully you can still score a copy tomorrow. I think we have to probably like hurry up a little bit because we're already quite late, and I think we've been very engrossed in so many conversations. It's been fantastic. So yeah, maybe to cut to the chase, because we're talking about this convention, which and Maria mentioned also the propositions for non-fascist living, which indeed has been a longer-term project that we've been doing here and to cobble together, concrete forms of non-fascist living as fascisms continue to undermine and fragment the very foundation of a possibility of common life. And in this moment, Marwa, I mean, you live in Berlin, where one cannot even speak, announce the genocide in Gaza, and let's stand, a much longer history of occupation. And here in the Netherlands, we've just, have the formation of a far-right coalition. So this country is becoming more of a nationalist enclosure. And in the face of this, Usufructuaries, and in bringing together this convention, and it's actually I think this convention follows on in a sequence of conventions and other kinds of gatherings. So it's also definitely by no means a one-off event. And I think in your work, Marwa, this is the struggles that you connect with and consolidate to make meaningful potential alliances between struggles that are confronting the violence of capitalism and its inherent individuated property form. So, Marwa, I think just very broadly, and precisely in the urgency of coming together in this moment, in this conjuncture of dispossession, what does this coming together mean for you on an artistic level, also in terms of doing this within a space such as here at BAK, and on a political level? And so how is this kind of collective assembling, how can it be a component of political struggle? Or maybe how, from the kind of sideline space of art, does this way of coming together give another kind of life to the way politics could be practiced?
Yeah, thanks so much, Wietske, and thank you, Maria, and thanks, Alex, Clara, Oli, Aidan, Geo, Didi, everyone at BAK. You've been really amazing, and thank you, Wietske, for so magnificently articulating this project together. I think it's been really great, and really, I think that I would like to start by saying also thanks to all the amazing, friends, contributors, and people that we've been, working together for so many years. And I'm actually quite overwhelmed, I have to say. We've had like an amazing, mind-blowing session this morning with Wietske Maas, Samantha and Areli, as well as Elif and Nujin, I know you as Nujin, Lena from Ginoir, as well as Luigi, Paloma, and Jude and everyone else that was part of our session. And it's quite, I have to say, overwhelming, but also mind-blowing, and also so precious to be able to gather actually in an institution and like within an institutional structure, especially I'm saying that coming from Berlin, and being able to think about how we are, or how we can actually organize together and cross this and enter this new world together. I think we have, since the 7th of October, all of us have been completely devastated, overwhelmed, but on top of everything, silenced, and not being able to, speak at least about, speak out, or like speak about our devastation even, not even like to mention solidarity. So we see ourselves as really, leaving an old world behind and just, and crossing to a new world. And I think it's amazing to be able to do it together, actually. In that sense, this is so precious here. To have, the comrades from Rojava and the comrades from Wietske Maas and all the other comrades from Buenos Aires and, everyone gathering here, and from South Africa, Johannesburg, gathering to think about, together to think about how do we organize and how do we give shape to a horizon of non-property. And this is, of course, a huge question, right? This is a huge question, but we've been thinking about it with the comrades for years now. And again, to quote here Ruthie, rehearsing it and trying to think about, how do we actually organize abolition, right? Because abolition as a horizon is something that will take, different shapes and different strategies in order to, kind of like organizing, and also what it means. And again, to quote Ruthie here, it means, of course, people think that abolition is a sort of an erasure or a kind of a void or a lack. But in fact, to paraphrase Ruthie here, it really means a presence, right? And I think this presence and this here, like being so committed and engaged with the questions that we are dealing with and the practices, the politics that we are dealing with is crucial at this moment in time. And again, I have to say that, as you said, as artists, again, we find ourselves now in a, I'm coming to art from as well, like a setting up structures, setting up artist-run spaces, research structures, as well as organizing. So as artists, we do also organize. And the question of form is crucial for, that kind of organizing, or this vision, if you like, of world we are stepping into. And I think this is where things actually come together, and this is where the conversation with the comrades becomes like really crucial as well. As Nurifer Kosh, a member of the autonomous women, the Kurdish autonomous women's movement, once told me, it is so important for us as a movement to really try and re-understand and redefine that relationship of aesthetics and politics, basically, or the place of art in our own struggles, right? Because often it's also, pushed aside or seen as less importance because of course, like all the forces, the market forces that co-opt art and the whole, economy we work in as artists. We work, in a... So I'm not going to go there, but I'm just saying that for us, it's extremely, this is also, giving form to this organizing is extremely crucial, and more so at this moment. And I have to say that we gather here around the question of property, of course, but starting from land. And in that sense, I think a question of a return to the land, or the land returning to us in this moment of a ongoing genocide on Gaza, and also like the ongoing Nakba of the Palestinian people, I think there is, and which centers actually the question, or like the practice of return. I think so here, like I just want to say that the return, or the return to land, or the land returning to us as, calling somehow, and I don't want to be too esoteric or metaphorical, but I think it's also important to bring that in. And what we learn actually from this rehearsal of return, like going back again and again and again and again. So
thanks for bringing that up, and then precisely the the notion of property. I mean, it can be applied to everything. Yet, challenging this hegemonic property relation, like decolonization, it's not a metaphor. And I think this, usufructuaries and the examples and the practices and experiences that have come together during these days, there's many that are driven by a very materialist question about bodies, relation to earth and land. So that's a very grounded perspective from which to talk. And indeed, it's nice you bring up Ruth Wilson Gilmore and her work on abolition geography, because our lives cannot be thought outside of geography. So existence is about placemaking and continuously writing, I think, or undoing geography from the scripts of death and dispossession. So geography, in this, like in its etymological sense, is writing the earth, right? So it's a kind of, is it sort of rewriting or a kind of unwriting of how it has been written, rewriting our relation, our life with earth. And Ruthie also says, like, freedom is a place of rewriting the world. And so this placemaking, it's also, it generates another kind of value that goes against the value extraction, whether it's through land or housing. And it's about, I guess, another kind of a relatedness or a generation of value through collective and namely feminist organizing as well, which has been at the crux of your research and films. So I'd like to ask you about this idea of undoing property from a feminized position. What has feminist organizing meant for you in terms of this writing the world, writing a different relation to land?
Yeah, and I think that I have learned so much about this from the Kurdish Autonomous Women's Movement, and especially from writings from Pelcin Tolidan. And I think that she has been like a real reference in terms of how to think about the relationship or how to redefine a relationship to land that is really, you know, outside of a property relation, but also really embedded in a feminist struggle. And in that sense, Pelcin talks a lot about that question of inheritance. What do you inherit, actually? You inherit struggle for the land. You inherit a relationship to land. You do not actually inherit land as such. You inherit a kind of a, if you like, we could call it a relation of usership. You inherit a relation, a kind of a knowledge, an intimate knowledge, and in her case, of course, militarized knowledge as well. But from that, you know, perspective of a guerrilla fighter, or a perspective of, you know, someone who has a relationship to land that is, you know, literally taking up arms and defending the land, but at the same time cultivating and at the same time thinking of ecological paradigms, right? And I think this has been like really a reference for me, because she expands this notion of self-defense into, you know, a kind of a self-defense that is a defense of relationships to land, that are ones of non-ownership, basically, that are ones of a transmission, of course, of a very intimate knowledge, but also a transmission of struggle and a transmission of relation. And I think for me that has been really like mind-shifting. And of course it sits in a contradiction of war. And it does sit in this, you know, and often if we want to think about these relations, they do sit in contradiction. And as we were, you know, discussing in our working session, that these relations of property or property as such should be redefined through different registers. So the legal is one register. The other is really a practice of non-property, right? That is perhaps sometimes on a reappropriated land, or a non-owned land, or an owned by a private owner, like one landowner, for example. But then again, the practice of it becomes what brings us to a practice, or to a change of this relationship, to a collectivizing, to a communalizing, etc. So I think we need to think also about property in all these different registers, and in all these different dimensions, and in all these different, you know, languages as well. And of course, I mean, here we have with us, and tomorrow the whole day will be really about discussing that, these practices of non-property, what shape do they take outside of legality, sometimes illegal considered, right? If one wants to think about them in a jurisdiction, or like in a legal sense, or in jurisprudence, right? So I think that, yeah, so I think that, well, to answer, I mean, now I've gone from departed a little bit from the feminist question, but I think it comes back to that as well. And we'll see tomorrow throughout the day how these are, you know, inherently interconnected, how all these politics of relations to land, and how all these, are kind of,
yeah, I mean, there are so many I think historical experiences or of forms of non-property, a commoning of land that you also address. I think it's also actively discussed in the sessions as well today, the masha, as one prime example, which is a form of collective land tenure, a kind of agricultural commons, you could say, in Lebanon, Palestine. So, and the masha is very particular and localized form of commons, because we have the whole commons discourse, and I think Brenner in a Brenner Bandar in an interview that she did was critical of this kind of universal sort of supposition of the commons, like it's assuming a kind of transcendental universal subject, and it often excludes actually really the evicted or the marginalized. So the masha could be perhaps an inheritance, as you say, as a form of usufruct, a usufruct otherwise, so not usufruct in the sense of like somebody just using a land that is owned by someone else. And so a radical rearticulation of the commons, and a very inclusive commons. So to think about this commons and in relation to land, but how do we do that? How can we do that when there is no land? So in a situation or with many are faced in adversity through being evicted or fragmented into diaspora through war in Palestine, Syria, Sudan, Ukraine, also through financial colonization, which we discussed today in the working session with Veronica Gago and Lizzie Caballero. So I was thinking, like, how could usufructuaries be also about inhabiting the paradox of placemaking when displaced? So if, as Ruthie says, if freedom is a place, how is that place made even when in exile? And I think this also came up in one of the Berlin reading group sessions that was convened by Lama El-Khatib and Jud al-Tamimi. And you also brought up this idea of the landless masha. What kind of possibilities does that open up?
Yeah, I don't know exactly, but yeah, I mean, we've been thinking about these forms of commons and these forms of relations, let's say, to agriculture, like a collective agriculture practices, as well as different relations to land through that practice of the masha. I mean, the masha is also something that still exists in Lebanon. It has been eradicated in other places in the Levant, right? But it still exists legally, actually, as in, like, every village has its masha, etc. So this is, I think, quite interesting. Also, of course, in Palestine, this has been extensively written about by Brenna in her book, Colonial Lives of Property, under the chapter of improvement, actually. So improvement being, as a justification for the eradication of certain property relations that were in place if we want to think about the, Ottoman space. And I don't want to say that I'm like a nostalgic to the Ottoman space, but I'm also right? So in a way, I have inherited these stories. I have inherited these relations or these practices as stories, right? And for me, they are not really eradicated, right? And when I talk about, like an Ottoman space as well, I'm talking about a space where, you don't have like a nation-state formations yet, right? So it's a completely different subjectivities, and it's a completely different relations in place. So, but yes, the question of delineation and the question of parceling and bordering are here, I think, also related to these nation-state formations. And in that sense, I think there is something that has been inherited from a pre-nation-state in that form. And also the Masha is, of course, like one of them, still existent and still legally, a legal category actually in Lebanon. Yeah, I mean, of course, in Palestine it has been the privatization has been accelerated through settler colonialism. But in Lebanon, it does still exist, and yeah, I don't know.
Thank you. No, Marwa, I wish we could make time when we don't have time. I think time has been a real pertinent predicament for us. But thank you so much. Yeah, I think we should move on to the conversation. We have a beautiful, phenomenal